Well, good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. It's so good to have you on. Looking forward to this conversation. I'm sure so many people will benefit from our conversation. So I'm looking forward to diving right in and seeing where this takes us.
Awesome, thank you.
I'd love to ask my guest this question first, though. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I think, leading your life by the golden rule, right? Treat others like you want to be treated. So I think I try to do that as much as possible. So I can be the best person I can be, and hopefully the people that I interact with will be the best people that they can be as well.
That's such a good piece of advice. It's so true. I've heard so many people talk about how important that rule has been for their life and just the way they interact with people and show people respect and honor, especially in the work that you do. I think that's critical to be able to see people as individuals who are unique and have something special to offer to the world.
Yes, absolutely.
So, tell me about some people in your life who serve to inspire you or be a mentor for you on your journey.
Yeah, my biggest mentor, was her name is Kathy Mayamori, and when I graduated from speech pathology school, you have to have a mentor for about 9 months. So you're not, just flailing around in the world. And I worked in the school district, and she was my mentor for 9 months. And I literally called her every day. And, she was such a resource for me. She was never stressed. She was never like overwhelmed. She always was smiling. She was always so helpful, and she was never too busy to help me. And, it really helped me be a better therapist, because then I could mirror what she was doing, how she was interacting with kids and parents, and it was just super helpful. And the team that we worked with as well, the other speech therapists on our team, they were also great mentors, and they've all retired now. So I was like the young one, and I was going into to work in the schools, and I was able to learn from these really great seasoned therapists.
So, what got you into that line of work? Because that was something my wife always thought she wanted to do. So, what led you into that particular field?
I really didn't know what I wanted to do exactly in life, but I think when I was about 8 years old, my grandfather was ill. He had lung cancer, and he ended up passing away. And I remember feeling at that time very helpless. Like I wanted to help him and I wanted to do more. But being 8 years old, you can only do so much. And so I wanted to be helpful, or be a positive thing in people's lives. And I think that sparked this need to help people and nurture people. And so going through school, I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. I thought maybe I'd want to be a teacher, because I had really great teachers. I loved, teaching other people things. And when I was in high school, I played sports, and I learned about physical therapy, because you get injured and you learn about all these things. And I was like, well, maybe that could have been somebody that could have helped my grandfather. So I looked into physical therapy school, but you needed a master's degree at the time. And so I figured, well, why don't I get my bachelor's degree in something else I love, which was English literature and creative writing. And so I was going through my bachelor's program, and when it came time to apply to physical therapy school, I was not 100% sure that I wanted to do that. And someone said, well, have you thought about speech therapy? Because I was doing competitive speech in high school and college competitions. And I was like, well, let me take a look at what that is. And I was going to school in Oregon at the time, but I'm from Hawaii. And so I looked at our University of Hawaii at Manoa, and they had a graduate program for speech therapy. So I thought it was kind of perfect. I could go back home, I could apply and be home and study at grad school. And then come to find out, there's a shortage of speech therapists in all different areas, right? In the schools and the hospitals and all that. And so the school district was really desperate for therapists. And so they gave us a stipend and said, well, if you work for us for 3 years, we will literally give you, I think it was like $13,000. And that covered, I was in state tuition. So it pretty much covered my graduate school program. So I thought of it as a automatic job. And then I got to, not have debt for grad school. Yeah.
It's amazing. I always think I know people who have had a need of speech therapy. My churches all had schools, and we had various different levels of kids with particularly learning issues that they struggled with. Maybe think about one case that you worked with, one student that particularly resonated with you, and tell us how that turned out.
Yeah, we have so many kids that I worked with. But one child that I still work with today, I started working with her when she was about 2.5 years old. Her name is Rose, and she's on the autism spectrum disorder um, diagnosis. And she was basically nonverbal, very few words. She would vocalize a little bit. I come to find out she was very farsighted. She could see far, but she could not see near. So everything up close was very blurry to her. And they finally did get her glasses, and the whole world just opened up. And she just turned 5, and now she's like having conversation. She's very funny. She still needs special education services because she does still have the diagnosis and a lot of the characteristics that go along with it. But she's so verbal. She's always like greeting me with, "Hi, Miss Janine. Like, how was your day?" Just little conversational exchanges. And then her parents are always telling me, "Oh, we went to a birthday party and Rose was talking to so and so." I'm just like a different person, like she's not used to. And, she's able to converse with a stranger and relate to somebody that she would not have been able to a couple of years ago. So that's like one of the great, stories that I love to tell because it makes me happy, it makes the parents happy, and the parents' reaction is really a reflection of the work that I try to put into the therapy sessions, because to see them smile and be like, "Rose did this and this today," I'm like, "Oh wow, it's great."
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So what inspired you to write the book Play Dumb and Sabotage?
I wanted to create a greater impact on the world, right? So I work with early intervention speech therapy a lot, which is 0 to 3 years old. And I was seeing a lot of kids that were late talkers, but physically they were sound. They didn't have any physical disabilities. They didn't have any cognitive disabilities. They had a lot of understanding. They understood what we wanted from them. Like if I said, pick up the book, or, "Where's the dog?" They'd be able to tell me by pointing, but they wouldn't express. And I was finding that a lot of parents did not have the training to work with their kids. They didn't have the knowledge of how to expose language, how to practice language. And even new therapists, I work with a lot of speech therapy assistants, and they were still learning how to expose language and practice language with their clients and everything. So I felt like there was a greater need to train and educate, and we could really decrease the number of kids who are getting speech therapy or need speech therapy that may not have needed it if their parents or caregivers or educators were better trained and educated on how to expose language, how to practice language, and different strategies to incorporate that into their daily lives.
I love that. One of the themes of your book is mindful under anticipation. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? So the title is Play Dumb and Sabotage. And the play dumb part of it is we are, as caregivers, teachers, parents, we over anticipate what the child might need, right? So if we're a parent and we have a little baby, we're going to make sure that the baby's fed, that the baby's dry, that the baby has a blanket or a toy or whatever they might need. We over anticipate what they need. And in turn, the child or baby doesn't have to really do anything. Everything is done for them. And sometimes, even as educators, we might over anticipate what the children might need and prepare them too much, and not really think about what the child needs to naturally interact with in their environment. So mindfully under anticipating means to know what the child might need, but to reel that back and wait for the child to either be able to indicate either through a cry or for a reach or through eye contact or some kind of simple sign, and then to be able to have that child interact naturally with their environment. So it's knowing what the child might need. So not neglecting the child's needs at all, but knowing what they need, but also reeling that back and letting that natural interaction happen.
So as parents, we always have that desire to want to do everything for our child. And so it's hard to kind of know the proper balance you're talking about. How do we do just enough, but not do so much that we cripple our child where they can't do things for themselves? I think the hardest thing for me, I have 6 kids, the point where our kids don't need me as much. And you feel like as a parent, somehow you want to do more, but it's like, no, they need to do this. And so you want to kind of push back and let them find their own way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it helps with communication, right? So if you're always doing things for the kids, then they learn to just be waited on in a sense, right?
Right.
And so a lot of these kids, especially we don't want the kids to cry. We don't want them to be uncomfortable or sad, or, we want them to be happy. And so to be good parents, we think that by not having them cry, by having them be happy all the time, we're being really good parents. But in actuality, in the terms of communication, it's really doing them a disservice.
I love the fact your book also provides strategies, because if you're trying to figure this out as a parent, you need advice, practical tips. So talk about how you create opportunities for parents every day to kind of practice language with their kids.
Absolutely. So the other side of the title is to sabotage, right? And that's the practice part. So we think about it as like, if you're going to play basketball and you're going to be shooting free throws, you don't just shoot it every once in a while. You're going to practice it and have it be up to mastery. You want to be good at it. So practicing little things like during snack time, you want to give the child a little bit of snack rather than the whole bowl of snack, so that you can ask for more, indicate more, or you can model the sign for more, or you can do hand over hand if they can't even do the sign themselves. So you can just give them a couple goldfish or a couple blueberries or a little bit of juice or water so they can ask for more. And then you can also have like a favorite toy in sight but out of reach. So the child might reach for the toy, or they might indicate they want it. They might grunt or something. And then you can be like, oh, and you can give them the vocabulary like bear. I want bear. Here you go. Here's the bear. And then model. I call it scaffolding. So you don't want to say like a whole sentence all at one time. You want to start off with the target vocabulary and then kind of build slowly and slowly a little bit of a longer phrase and then a whole sentence or question. And then another thing, when I was, would dress my son in the morning when he was little and could not even talk, I would say, what do you want to wear? Do you want to wear the red shirt or blue shirt? And I would hold it about shoulder width apart so he could look at one of them, even if he can't speak. And then I would, say, oh, the red shirt. I love red. Red is the color of strawberries. And, give him that kind of vocabulary. So he's hearing all of this, and we call it language bombardment when we talk about something, a vocabulary term, and then also expand on what we're talking about. So when you're holding things shoulder width apart, you can see where they're looking, even if they can't point or reach. But if you hold it too close together, you're not sure where they're looking at. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. As I think about what you're talking about, there's always some common misconceptions we have about language development. What do you hope that your book addresses about some of those common misconceptions?
I would say that, it's okay for a child to cry, right? There's a chapter in my book that says, a child's ever died of crying, as far as we know.
Right.
Right? So it's the
Just to parents.
Yes, I know. We've all had that child in the restaurant. They're just like, oh my gosh, they just won't stop crying, or on the plane. But there's this communication part of it. Crying is part of communication, and whining or whatever it is. So there's this part of the communication that the child needs to be able to express. And also, when the child is crying when they're a little bit older, I say it's like stretching their ability, right? So you wouldn't tell a child who's not able to stand to run.
Right.
So I'm not going to tell a child who's nonverbal to speak in sentences, but I might have them reach, I might have them sign, I might have them try to imitate a vocalization or a sound, right? But if I know that they can, like for instance, a lot of kids, they are so dependent upon their parent or caregiver to just provide something for them that even though they're able to use words or sounds, they will just cry because they know their parent will provide whatever they want. So if a child's able to say a word or part of a word or maybe even a couple words, but they're not doing that task, they're not saying like more cracker, more puzzle, but I know that they can do it, right? Then I'm going to stretch their ability. And if they throw a little tantrum or something, I'm going to say it's okay that they do that because they are testing if I'm going to give in. And you have to be a little bit more stubborn than they are. So a lot of parents, they don't want their child to cry. So once a child cries or throws a little tantrum, they provide that thing that the child wants right away because it makes a child stop crying. So it's okay for the child to cry, especially if you know that they have the ability to use their words. So like one example, my niece, it's not really about language, but it's about being independent. So when she was little, but she was still at this age where she was able to feed herself. But she really wanted my brother to feed her. And my brother made a really nice peanut butter jelly sandwich. He cut it into little tiny squares. So all she had to do was literally pick it up and put it in her mouth. And he was in a rush. He wanted to go run some errands. And he's like, we have to go. Come on, you have to eat. And she's like, I want daddy to feed me. So she had words.
Right.
She had this language. So she could do this, right? And I said, well, you know what? I don't have to go anywhere today. I'll sit with her at lunch. And he's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, go. I'm fine. And so I said, you're going to feed yourself today. And she goes, no. And I was like, no, you can just pick it up. You can do it. So she picked it up and I go, feed yourself. She would cry and whine. So I said, okay, well, go to your corner, because she had a little, timeout corner, and you go sit there until you're ready. And she would cry, and then are you ready? She's like, okay. So she would come back. I said, okay, feed yourself. So we went back and forth with this a number of times. It took a while, but in the end, she fed herself. So I wasn't like, you're crying, now I'm going to feed you. I'm like, I know you can do this task, and it's very simple. So you're going to do it. So it's, maybe not that long for a lot of things. You don't want the child to cry for too long, but I knew that she could do it. Me being, her auntie, I was like, no, we're getting this task done, and it's okay if you're crying, because I knew that her ability was greater than what she was showing.
So that example you just gave, how do parents in that situation stay motivated and consistent in their efforts to nurture their child? Because like your temptation is, I don't have the time for this. I don't have the patience for this. And so if you give in, then the child wins and you kind of sabotaging whatever progress you've made before. So how do you encourage parents to stay engaged in this?
Oh, absolutely. It's a struggle, right? I've been there where I'm like, okay, we have to go now. So let's just do it. Get it done. We're putting your shoes on. We're going. But there is, when you think about the big picture, right? The long-term goal of what you want your child to be able to do, by just doing things for the child once they start crying or whatever, is really sabotaging their progress in a way, right? So thinking about the long-term goal, thinking about how you as a parent need to set a good model for your child, I think that's what the motivation is, because otherwise there's going to be this control, right, by the child and yourself, and the child's going to win if you just keep giving in. Then the child is running the parenting rather than the parent is running the parenting. So I think that just understanding that the control needs to be in the parent and not in the child. But it is situational, right? So if I'm in a rush, I might say, okay, you feed yourself with one, I'll feed you with one. So we'll do like something where we can alternate. Or I might have a reward system and say, okay, if you feed yourself for 3, then we can do this game afterwards or whatever it is. So having a reward system in place. So, to get things done. So if you dress yourself in the morning, then we get to go to the park. Or if you, things that kids are very dependent upon their parents, right? Even my son who's 12, he's like, Mom, you got to help me change. I'm like, dude, you can do it. I mean, granted, my son does have a disability. I'm just like, I know you can get your pants on. You can do that. But sometimes I'm like, okay, we're in a rush. We're going to be late for school. We need to go now.
Right. I love that. As you did research for this book, what research data surprised you?
A lot of the things in my book are from my experience, right? So they don't have a lot of actual scientific research per se. So it's really about factual things that I've experienced throughout the years that I've been doing this for 23 years.
Right.
So it's a lot of hands-on experience. But the writing the book was just a monster. I don't know if you've written a book, but
Yes.
it's I think the hardest part is getting the words on the computer, or sitting down to do the words on the computer. But yeah, getting things done, was being consistent with myself, was probably the hardest part.
I would imagine. So I'm curious, as also a foreign writer, How did you set time apart in your schedule to write? Did you have a consistent schedule? You have a certain pattern you wrote? Did you write a certain time? How did you pour into this?
Absolutely. I think I kind of approached it like the gym, where I would avoid it as much as possible. And I found that I wrote better at night. I'm more of a night owl. So if I, put my son to sleep and everything, I would take the last couple hours of the night to think about what I'm going to write and kind of sit down and try to do it. Wasn't doing it every day. I probably would have gotten it done faster. But like once I had the outline of the book done, then I could go into each different section, each chapter, and then I would kind of free write in that chapter. When I got stuck, I would go to another chapter and I would free write and do that. And I would jump back and forth rather than try to, begrudgingly trudge through chapter one until I got to the end and go to chapter two. Because I think I would have avoided it much more had I tried to get from beginning to end in one linear pattern, like pathway.
No, that's so true. I tell writers, especially new writers, write the easiest chapter first, because at least you can say, I got that done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I finished like my first chapter, I was like, oh, wow, that's done. And then, you go back and you go like, well, I don't have that much more in this one. And then I have, because I was jumping around and filling in things with different chapters, I was like, well, I have a lot written, which is good, rather than like, oh, I got one done and then I have like 10 more to do. Yeah.
I love that. As you look at your field and with all the technology and the new innovations, where do you see the future of speech pathology?
I would have to say that with the technology these days with AI, I think that there's going to be a lot of abilities to have conversations with AI and to have speech sessions with AI, even though there's nothing that's going to replace the human aspect. But for especially with patients that have strokes or kids with autism that need to have a conversation, practice social conversations, I think that there's going to be an app or something that has conversation, like you can have a conversation with Siri, right? You can say, how are you doing today, and Siri will answer you back, and there's a little short conversation. I think that there's going to be something like that for speech therapy down the road, and I think it's going to help to complement the in-person and human touch of speech therapy with a therapist.
I love that. I'm curious, now that you got your book done, what's your next initiative, your next project that's on the docket?
I have a few things that I have lined up. I would like to create my first webinar and then an online course. And then within the next year, I'd like to do a TED Talk. So I need to get all my ducks lined up in a row. And with the new year coming and everything, it's a good time to get things down on paper and really set goals. Yeah.
That's so cool. So I love to ask my guests this question. What do you want your legacy to be?
I would love, as far as like speech therapy, I would love my legacy to be, she helped to decrease the number of children that needed speech therapy, or also educated parents, educators, and caregivers on how to introduce language and practice strategies, because that's so much of what I'm trying to do is educate. And if everybody could be educated, that'd be amazing, because I think we could really, it would decrease the number of kids that would need speech therapy, but also be able to address the kids that need speech therapy, that have autism or something else, that maybe the parents are unsure or educators are unsure how to approach, how to work with them. So I think overall would just help everybody to be able to work with kids and to develop language. That'd be really helpful. And personally, my legacy would be my son, because he is an amazing person, and I would love for him to, he loves music, he loves dancing, so I would love for him to be able to achieve whatever he would like to.
So what advice do you have for parents who has a child that has some speech issues? What words of wisdom do you have for them?
Don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't be afraid to set your ego aside, especially if someone says, I think your child might need speech therapy, you should, why don't you reach out either to your pediatrician for a referral or to your local agency to get an evaluation. Because some parents, unfortunately, they take it very personally, right? They think oh, if there's something wrong with my child, there's something wrong with how I'm parenting. And, they are not a speech professional. So there's no expectation that they should be able to know how to work with language or articulation, to have the ear to hear different arid sounds or how to repair language and grammar. They're not expected to do that. And so, when my toilet is broken, I call a plumber.
Right.
When my car is broken, I call a mechanic. So when something is wrong or needing attention, you should really turn to the professional and get some training and help, because that's the best way to help your child.
I love that. Is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have asked you?
Maybe just where to get my book. I'm just kidding. I know you're gonna ask that later.
But since you brought that up, where can people find your book?
The best way to find me and find my materials is on my website. It's called playdumandsabotage.com. And from there, they can contact me. There's a free PDF on how to play dumb and sabotage. And then they can find links for my book, my social media, and then any of my podcasts that I've been on and any upcoming events that I might have.
Well, Janine, thanks so much for taking the time and for writing this book. It is so important because so many kids have some levels sometimes of language that they can work on, and parents can know exactly what to do with some practical tips your book gives them, and connecting with you, it can find out more resources. So thank you for taking the time to make this an important aspect of what you do and your mission in life.
Thank you so much. I think this book really is for any parent and any caregiver educator that interacts with children, because as a parent, we go through birth training, right, when we have a child, but we don't go through language development training. And I think this is a really great conversational handbook that anybody can pick up and understand.
Yes. Well, you have a great new year and blessings on the work you do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Happy New Year as well.